So buying a second home is a really ambitious money goal. It's not something that you're going to do when you're just starting out. It's something that you're going to do when you've probably owned your primary residence for a while, you've got some savings, you've got some home equity, and you're ready to make a really big move. Here's what you need to know about buying a second home. There are a lot of reasons to buy a second home. It's not necessarily just because you want a vacation home, although why wouldn't you want a vacation home? People also sometimes want an investment property. And these days that can mean a lot of different things. It could mean something as simple as hanging on to your starter home when you upgrade to a bigger home and renting it out. It might mean having a rental in the traditional sense with you're a kind of a landlord, you've got a long-term tenant, but short-term rentals are really popular now as well. Flipping properties is still a thing, and that counts as an investment property because it's, not your primary home, you're not living in it. Bottom line is that you're earning income from it. So buying a second home is unfortunately much harder than buying a house that's your primary residence. Everything that you needed in order to qualify for a mortgage for the house you live in now, you need it to be even better to get a second home. You needed a good credit score. You need a great credit score. You needed a solid debt to income ratio. Now you need a really good debt to income ratio. And that might be a little bit harder since you already have a mortgage. You needed to make a down payment. With a second home, whether it's a vacation home or an investment property, you're going to be looking at a much larger down payment. So something that's really important to be aware of when you're looking for a mortgage for a second home is that you're actually going to need to tell the lender what you're using the second home for, whether it's going to be an investment property, whether it's going to be a vacation home, or what they would consider to be a true second home, because that's going to change what types of loans you might be eligible for, and it's also going to impact your rate. On lender websites where you can actually shop and compare rates, it's a good idea if you see a menu where it lets you toggle the type of home to change it from primary residence, which is usually the default, and make it say either second home or investment property, depending on how you're going to use the home. That way you can get the best idea of what you might be looking at in terms of an interest rate. The bad news is that whether it's a vacation home or an investment home, your rate is going to be higher than it would be with your primary residence. In the scheme of things, interest rates are really low right now. This will still be a relatively low rate, but it won't be as low as what you see when you're looking at mortgage rates for primary residences. So if you're thinking about buying a second home sometime down the road, you're going to want to make the most inclusive budget that you can. Because having a second home is a lot more than just having two mortgages. There are all kinds of expenses that you might not necessarily think of and that are going to vary depending on how you use it, right? If you have a long-term tenant, they might cover some of the utilities, but if it's a vacation home that you don't live in and isn't occupied very often, you're going to have to weigh keeping different utilities on. That could mean water, electricity, even things like Wi-Fi are worth thinking through and adding to that big budget that you're making. Another thing you're going to have to think through is maintenance costs. Even if it's a place that you're not living, you might need to keep it looking nice. Your neighbors who live there year-round will definitely appreciate it if the lawn is mowed, even if you aren't there to see it. Another part of maintenance is just considering whether you want to tackle things yourself or you want to pay someone else like a property manager to do it. Even if you own an investment property that's right in town, you might not want to be at your renter's beck and call every time something goes wrong. Having a property manager does take away from your bottom line, but if you value your time, it might be worth it. A big factor when you're thinking about costs on a second home is taxes. And it's complicated enough that you might want to just consult with a CPA or a tax attorney before you buy a second home, because your tax situation can really change depending on whether it's an investment property or a vacation property. Even if your lender considers something to be a vacation property, the IRS might think it's an investment property. So that's something else that you'll need to look into. Another thing to think about with a second home is homeowner's insurance. You're going to need a different type of policy than you would with your primary home, and unfortunately, it's probably going to be more expensive. Policies for houses that are unoccupied, even if you have a security system, tend to be pricier. as do policies that cover renters, whether they're long-term or short-term tenants. You're also going to want to budget for a bigger rainy day fund for your second home, whether that's for covering a vacancy if you don't have renters for a little while, or just dealing with an unforeseen emergency like a burst pipe. One other thing to factor in is travel. If your second home is far away from you, you might have to shell out some cash to get there. All in all, making sure that you know every single part of the financial picture and how it'll work for you moving forward is really important before you move forward with buying a second home. So once you've thought through everything, if a second home is right for you, congrats, because that's awesome. Whether it's being able to stay overnight in a condo and not having to commute, or being the cool friend who gets to invite everyone to their lake house, you're definitely going to enjoy it. And it's also something that can help you long-term, whether that's continuing to earn investment money over the years, as well as building equity in that second home, or someday, way in the future, being able to retire in your favorite vacation spot. I'm Kate Wood, and having just bought one home, I can't imagine buying a second one right now. But if you could, or if you learned something today, hit that like button and subscribe to our channel.